And, it's hard because I worry about that line between being a little bitch and actually making a good call. Because physical stuff is hard for me. I'm not a natural athlete. Every time I work out, I want to quit because it hurts and I hate it. And so every time I do anything remotely physical, I want to bitch out. And so I'm always fighting myself to not bitch out.
Yeah.
And so that can make it really hard to know when you're not being a little bitch.
Right. Yeah. I mean, there's a difference between the natural discomfort that comes with exercise and physical activity and the kind of pain that indicates that something is wrong with your body, the kind of pain that says, actually, no, you should either A, take a break, or B, get out of this situation. Hello and welcome to This Fucking Trail, home to brutally honest takes on Texas trails, hiking hilarity, and all things adventure-y. I'm your MC, John, and I'm here to warn you that this podcast is not for young children or anyone with a sensitivity to swears or strong opinions. Now, over to the hiking hostess with the mostest. Yes, I did just say that. An intrepid explorer and affirmed potty mouth, not to mention my wife, Gabrielle.
Yep, that's me.
And what are we going to be talking about today, Gabrielle?
So today we're going to talk about the Caprock Trailway.
Okay, and let's assume that everyone's as completely uninformed as I am. What actually is the Caprock Trailway? Because I had never heard of this before you decided to hike it.
I actually hadn't heard of it either. I had to do some deep Googling to even find this. This doesn't pop up on a lot of Google searches when you're thinking about backpacking in Texas. So it actually used to be a railway. Burlington Northern built this railway as part of the Fort Worth and Denver South Plains Railway in the early 1920s. So it ran freight and passenger service between Lubbock and Esteline starting in 1928. And it was used continually until 1989. Then in 1992, Texas Parks and Wildlife acquired this railway, which is 64 miles long. And they opened it as a trailway in 1993 to the public.
Okay, yeah. So, I mean, it is relatively new in terms of park timelines in Texas. A lot of the parks have been around for quite a long time. This one, just since the 90s. So very cool. And this is one of those hiking experiences that's kind of end to end, right? It's not like a loop. It's sort of like it's a trailway, right? It's a long, like you said, it's a rail line.
So the whole point was to get stuff from point A to point B. And so it is a straightaway 64 miles long. And so that was quite a challenge figuring out how I was going to get from one end to the other by just me, myself, and I with one car.
Right, yeah. So this is not close enough to us that I could go and just easily drop you off, head home, and then go pick you up on the other end, right? I would have been staying in a hotel.
Yeah, this took me 7 hours to get there. So definitely not somewhere that I could utilize you to be my shuttle service.
Right, and whereabouts is this actually in Texas?
It's over in West Texas.
Okay, pretty close to Turkey, right?
Yes, it does run through the town of Turkey. It runs through Caprock Canyon State Park, if you know where that is as well.
Okay. Well, that makes sense with the name. So it actually runs through the town.
It runs through the town of Turkey.
Right. Yeah, that's what I meant. I guess I didn't realize it actually ran partway through the town limits.
It runs through a couple of towns. So it runs through Turkey, and then it runs through, oh my gosh, I never say it right. Kittikee?
Kittikee, I think?
Kittikee.
According to Wikipedia, that's the pronunciation.
I have been told how to say this town's name, and I just can't keep it straight in my mind. For listeners, it's spelled Quitaaque. So you tell me how you think that's fucking said.
Yeah.
What would you say if you just saw that word?
Boy, see, that's tough, right? Because first I'm thinking about, okay, how would the language of origin pronounce this? But then I'm also thinking, how would Texans pronounce this? And my experience with guessing the pronunciations of place names in Texas has been that I am wrong most of the time. So I'm not even going to guess.
Well, that's fair. Anyhow, so it runs through that town and through Turkey, which is pretty cool it makes you feel like a real through hiker when you're actually walking through a town on an official trailway.
Right. Yeah. Well, And this was sort of your goal with this experience, right? Was to kind of build up some of that through hiking style experience. And this is a great trail to challenge yourself and to experience that. A couple of the challenges that you ran into in planning this trip were water, because again, we are talking about hiking in Texas. So there's basically no free-flowing drinkable water anywhere. And then also, like you mentioned, if you drive out there, you're going to park at one end. And then if you hike to the other, you're a very long ways from your car. So that's kind of a problem, right? You wanted to be able to hike towards your car, ideally.
Yeah, for me, I wanted to be able to hike toward my car. So I came up with a couple of wild ideas. One of my crazier ideas was doing it as an out and back when I thought I wasn't going to be able to get somebody to shuttle me, but I quickly ditched that idea, but it did cross my mind. So my original idea was I was gonna get an Uber, which I guess anybody who regularly uses Uber knows that this isn't gonna work. But I was able to put in my destinations. I was going to start at what is called the South Plains Terminal and then hike. I was gonna park at the Esteline Terminal and hike from South Plains to Esteline, 64 miles toward my car. So Uber let me put in those two towns. They let me put in my credit card information and they let me quote unquote reserve the ride. But I guess the ride has to be picked up or something by a driver. Yeah. And nobody ever picked it up and Uber never said anything. So by the time I realized that, hey, Uber's not going to come through for me, I'm like, oh shit, I'm fucked. And that's when I kind of thought, oh, can I do it as an out and back real quick? 124 miles, no big deal. It's a real quick out and back.
Yeah, this is a lesson that we learned the hard way. There's no guarantee that someone will do it. They aren't employees. They are independent contractors or whatever their relationship is. They get to decide, right? So that's the gig economy for you. Anyways, ultimately, that didn't work. No Uber. And out and back that's 128 miles if you were to do the whole thing. Obviously, you could have turned back sooner than that, but still, that's like your worst nightmare with a hiking trail.
Yeah, not finishing the trail, unacceptable. Just no.
Well, and just hiking back along the same trail.
And yes, doing an actual out is kind of like a nightmare, but also only going halfway and then coming back, that's also an absolute fucking nightmare and just pretty much off the table.
Yeah, so that whole idea went out the window pretty quick. And what did you do to actually solve this?
So I went to my old friend Facebook, and I think I got on some sort of unofficial Texas State Parks Facebook group and asked if anybody did shuttles. And some person said, no, I don't, but hey, here's a local group in
Turkey.
No, the other town, the one I can't pronounce.
Kittikay.
She said, hey, here's a local Kittikay Facebook group. You could post in here and ask if somebody would give you a ride. And so that's exactly what I did. And some lady said, yeah, sure, I'll give you a ride. And I told her, Uber was going to charge me $100 to take me from point A to point B. So I'll give you $100 if you'll drive me. And she said she'd do it. And, to be honest, I did a little bit of light Facebook stalking. So did you, to try to vet this person. There was actually a couple people who said they'd do it. And so we were definitely doing some stalking, trying to figure out if these people were on the up and up. But in the end, how can you really know?
Yeah, you can never truly be sure if, you're living next door to a serial killer or if one is offering you a ride, right? Up until you do find out.
Yeah, so this was kind of wild and out of character for me. But at this point, I was pretty set that I was going to do this fucking trail. And since Uber had fallen through for me, I was going to find a way to do it, come hell or high water.
Well, you said the name.
I did, a Freudian slip.
So, well, that's of course, that's where the name comes from, is cursing at the trails. But anyways, so we lightly stalked a couple of people and decided, okay, this person seems responsive, reliable, like a real human being who's, not super sketchy. And so, yeah, you talked to her and booked a ride, so to speak.
I did. And of course, since I have so much anxiety, I was terrified that this person was going to cancel on me last minute or
Right.
not show up. And I'm like, I hope she realizes that, and I told her I'm driving from San Antonio all the way out here. So hopefully there'd be a little bit of weight on how much of an investment I'm putting into this. But I was absolutely terrified that she would cancel at the last minute. And so I cannot even tell you how many times I messaged her like, hey, are we still on for December 4th? There were multiple messages like that. And she was so gracious about it and always like, yep, we're on. But I did have a lot of anxiety about that aspect.
Yeah, I mean, understandably so. So there was one other really important thing that had to happen before you could hike this trail, this fucking trail, if you will. And that was you had to solve your water situation, because this is a multi-day hike across, as we've mentioned several times, 64 miles. Carrying enough water for the entire hike would make your pack pretty fucking heavy.
Would. I am not averse to carrying a lot of water. I am a Texas.
This we know.
I am a Texas hiker, so I'm not a little bitch who's trying to shave off every ounce of water that they can. I'll save that for the Coloradans and all of that.
Shots fired.
I'm not an ultralighter. I don't think it ever will be, nor do I really want to be. But because this is a trailway and because it runs through some towns, I plan to be able to stop at a gas station in Kitty Quay, that one. I know I'm butchering it every time I say it, and so then I'm like, what's the point of even trying to say it right? But there's a gas station there, and there's a gas station in Turkey, and they were both open 24/7. I don't know how. These are tiny little towns with populations of, I think, less than 500 each. But they were both open 24/7, so I knew I'd be able to get water there. And then past Turkey, there's quite a long stretch. It's quite a ways. So I decided I was going to cache some water at some of the little trailheads for this trailway, which you're allowed to do. I did call the rangers at Caprock Canyon State Park to confirm that you're allowed to cache, and they said, yes, that was okay.
Yeah, always a good practice to check in with the rangers if you're not sure if something is allowed or not. Some people prefer to fuck around and find out, and I mean, I guess that works for some people, but it also doesn't work for other people. And, these parks will find the hell out of you if they catch you breaking the rules. So, always recommend doing your homework and just asking.
Once I got the go ahead to cache, I decided a couple places I was going to cache water. So I got up, I think at 3 a.m., 4 a.m. in the morning of my hike and drove out to the area. And I stopped at the two places I was going to cache. And I was really stressed about this because I didn't know exactly where do you put your water? How do you hide it so nobody's going to grab it? How do you know that nobody's going to come take your water? Another hiker who's out there and is like, ooh, look at this water and drink it. And then I'm like, I'm going to die when I come up on my empty bottle. So I was really worried about leaving my shit out, probably unnecessarily so. But I stopped at the Tampico Siding Trail, at the Parnell station it was. I stopped to drop off some water. And so I kind of walked out on the trail a little ways. I went up a little bit of an embankment where I didn't think people would be, and I left a gallon of water with the dates that I planned to be there to pick it up. I wrote, pathetically, I might add, please don't take this. Thought about writing, I'll die if you take it, but I didn't go that far. I didn't grovel quite that much. And then I did that at another trailhead as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think I would have just written, if you take this, you're going to kill me. Or if you take this, I'll die. Nothing wrong with a little trail humor, right? What's a little joke between hikers? But yeah, you successfully cached water for the first time, and it was still there when you went back for it?
It was. It was not taken.
What I have found in our camping and hiking is I feel like most of the time, while people may be sort of jerks about leaving trash around or not picking up their own stuff, most people seem to leave other people's shit alone in the parks. I don't think I've ever had an issue with anybody messing with anything that I've left around, aside from the raccoons, who are just absolute little trash bandits. But
yeah, and that's a part of why I didn't cache any food. Because you can't trust those little fuckers.
And those are not the worst fuckers that will be after your food out there. But okay, well that's kind of the whole prep story. And so at this point, I think we're just about ready to move into talking about the actual hiking itself, which is a whole nother beginner backpacker adventure. Okay, so let's talk about what happens when you actually get to the trailhead, you're waiting for your ride, and the adventures already start.
They certainly do. I pull into Esteline Terminal, which is where I was going to park my car, and I was going to get a shuttle ride from there to the opposite end of the Trailway and hike toward my car. So when I got there, there was one other car in the parking lot. And what are the chances there's a person at that car? Which, okay, that's fine, whatever. But, my plan had kind of been, if I get there early after caching my water, maybe I take a little nap in the back of my car or whatever while I wait for the shuttle to come and get me. Well, I pull in. I see this person ratting around in their car. They're playing rap music. And so I kind of just sat there in the car going, what's this person doing? What's going on? I'm piddling on my phone. And then all of a sudden, knock, 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 knock. This person has come up and asked for a jump for his car. And my first excuse is, I don't have jumper cables. Nope, sorry, I can't help you, sir. And he goes, oh, no, I have cables. So then I'm like, well, fuck. Well, I really don't want to interact with a man in this completely remote, completely otherwise empty parking lot. Like, I really don't feel comfortable doing this, but I don't really know how to refuse at this point. And so I agree to give this man a jump. And he introduces himself, shakes my hand, says, hey, I'm Justin. What's your name? Oh, did you have a good Thanksgiving? Yeah, I had a good Thanksgiving. So I pull up the car next to his grungy looking car and he jumps it and he gets his car started. And then I'm kind of thinking he's going to drive off and that's going to be the end of it. Nope. Yeah. Continues to play his music. And
just to be clear, you listen to rap music. But you don't sit in parking lots blaring it super loudly for everyone to hear.
Yeah, if I'm listening if I'm listening to rap music that's not in my earbuds, it's like in my confined car as I'm driving. It's definitely not in a public parking space with all my windows and doors open. Okay, so I like rap as much as the next person. So after I jump him and get his car back alive, I drive as far away from his car as I can get in this parking lot and sit there going, oh my gosh, what do I do? He doesn't drive away. He continues to rat around in his car. At this point, he has no shirt. So he's shirtless. It's not cold, but it's certainly not hot by any means. And I see him pulling stuff out of his car. There's like a Swiffer mop of some sort that he pulls out. Like, I don't know what the fuck this man is doing, but he looks hella sus. And I started to get concerned that he was going to steal my car or break into it when I leave the car.
Yeah, I mean, those interactions are always awkward when somebody needs a jump. It's especially awkward, I think, when you're a solo female in a remote location and the only other person there is a man wanting a jump. I can understand your reticence. I would be concerned. And when he's super, super fucking sketchy, above and beyond that, like not just like acting like a normal person. And then who gets a jump? And then it's like, okay, thanks for the jump. Now I'm going to stay here.
What the fuck are you doing? Shirtless, blaring music, rummaging through your car. And
Swiffer mopping your back seat, whatever the fuck is going on.
It was so weird. I kind of sat there for a few minutes and was like, oh my gosh, he's going to steal my car. And the weight of caching the water and like these thoughts of, who are you and what the fuck are you doing out here? You have no business doing this. You have no business with a Facebook stranger coming to pick you up in 45 minutes and shuttle you 62 miles away from your car. Like, what the fuck are you doing? All this stuff is adding up to mean that you shouldn't do this. And so the anxiety and the panic starts to mount. And you were in the office that day, but I still called you melting down.
Yeah, so I usually I'm fortunate enough to work from home, but I did actually have to go in to the office. But I was able to make some time. And I guess I'm glad I did because you were in a rough place.
As per usual, before starting one of my backpack trips, I was freaking out and melting down. Only this time I was actually really convinced I shouldn't go and like I had no place doing this.
I don't even know what I said to talk you down.
okay, to be fair, you didn't really talk me down. I felt like whatever you said was bullshit, and it didn't really make me feel any better. But, like, what was I gonna do? Some stranger was gonna pull up in 45 minutes, and I couldn't no-show her. I mean, I guess I could have, but, like, I just felt stuck at this point. It's like, well, you've decided to get your butt over here. You can't back out now.
Sometimes putting yourself in a corner is what you need to move forward. You know?
Yeah, it was certainly a corner.
I wish it hadn't been a corner with Justin, but that unfortunately was out of anyone's control, apparently.
It was. So, eventually the lady who was going to shuttle me showed up actually a little bit early, which I was super grateful for. And she pulls up in her nice car, and I pop out real quick so she sees me and not this creep Justin. And she's like, oh my gosh, I'm so glad that was you. Like, I saw this other weird looking car and it didn't look like something a hiker would drive, but also I was getting a little sketched out. And so I realized, like, she's just as sketched out about giving a stranger a ride as I am about taking a ride from her. So that did make me feel a little bit better.
Yeah.
She was so nice. So we load up, and I still am like, oh God, Justin's here in this parking lot rummaging around in his car. Like, he's
fucking Justin, go home, man.
Like, yeah, well, just fucking leave. But he didn't. And so I was pretty convinced that when I arrived back at my car in a couple days, the windows would be broken into, or the car would be gone. Like, just gone, right? Because he wouldn't be able to start his car after he ran down the battery playing his rap music, and I would come back to nothing. Can you imagine?
I'm sorry. All I can hear, you keep going on about the rap music like it's such a big deal.
It is when you're in the middle of nowhere and there's no noise except for the wind and rap music.
This old hiker woman, get off my lawn with your loud music, you kids.
Well, I could talk about his saggy pants, but that feels a little too old even for me.
It does. I'm really glad that he didn't steal our car.
Wait, that could have happened. Don't spoil the end.
At this moment in time. But yeah, I mean, fortunately, we don't drive nice cars, and we don't have nice radios or anything that anyone would normally want to steal. In part, like, this reason only helps to justify our cheapness. Let's not say that is the reason. It's cheapness, but yeah, it's sort of a protective factor.
I was very glad not to be driving a fancy souped up Escalade at that moment.
Yeah, I think that probably would have gotten broken into. I don't have that much faith in Justin. Well, okay. So eventually you decide to leave.
I get in a car with a stranger.
Yes.
And drive 62 miles away from said car. And so as we're driving on the freeway, the lady who was giving me a ride, we pass a police car, and she's like, oh yeah, I know the sheriff. I told him I was going to be picking up a stranger. Which, like, further proves that she's freaked out about giving a stranger a ride, and just made me feel even better. So that was kind of fun. But anyhow, it seemed like everybody knew everybody, because she kind of gave me a tour through the towns and the rundown of these two small communities. And it did very much feel like, from her description, that everybody did know everybody, which I guess made me feel better at the time. I'm not really sure why. But eventually, she drops me off at the South Plains terminal, which isn't much to speak of. Supposedly it's a parking area from what I can gather from the map, but didn't look like much of a parking area to me. It was kind of next to some grain mills, I think, and it was really weird to have her drive away and me start to walk in the opposite direction.
I kind of getting some real thru hiker vibes there.
Yeah, I feel like maybe that is how thru hikers feel, but maybe even like a little bit more, because this was in the middle of butt fucking nowhere. Whereas, like when you start the AT or the PCT, these are famous landmarks, they're in famous parks. Like, there's literally nobody around out here. This is not a place that people are typically coming out to and hiking.
That is true. I think one of the misconceptions a lot of people have, that I had actually, about thru hiking, is that, like, you're out there alone with nature. And from what I've gathered, that is very much not the case. And I say from what I've gathered as if I've done some kind of research or something. But in fact, you've read a bunch of books and then told me about them. And it sounds like it's very much a social experience. Like, you may spend large chunks of your day alone or walking by yourself, but there are other people around a lot on these popular trails. You're not necessarily spending your evenings alone, even if you are spending your days walking by yourself.
Definitely not, if the books and the podcast can be believed, which is part of the reason I don't think I would ever do the AT, is it sounds like way too much of a social party for me.
Yeah, no, you very much prefer middle of godforsaken deserts in Texas, where literally the only other people around are just as crazy as you are, and there are not very many of them.
Yeah, actually, I didn't see any other hikers on the Trailway during my time there, which I didn't really expect to see a lot of people, but I saw nobody, which was a little bit trippy.
Yeah, that's wild. I kind of can't imagine going multiple days without seeing another human being. I say that I guess I can imagine that, but really I'm like spending that time at home, and I'm actually seeing other people on TV or on my computer. So I don't think it counts. Anyways, so you get started at last on the Caprock Trailway. You're off, and how does the first day go?
It wasn't too bad. It was very surreal feeling heading out, but the trail was nice, and I knew it was going to be very, very flat trail, so I anticipated being able to keep up a pretty decent pace. I knew the trail was supposed to be really nice and wide, well marked, very easy navigation, very opposite from what I usually encounter on Texas trails, and so I kind of thought I was going to be chilling on all aspects. To a certain aspect, I was. It was interesting because this trailway does go through farmland and ranchland property. You are walking through somebody's property, so the trailway is publicly owned by Texas Parks and Wildlife, but it cuts right through all sorts of privately owned property. And so that was very interesting to be going through people's land, to be able to glance over and 200 yards away there's somebody's house or there's somebody's hunting lease. So that was a little bit weird. But it was also kind of neat to see the civilization and then be walking through on this trail of your own power, and nobody knows you're out there, kind of.
So you're still sort of connected to human civilization, but you're also totally alone.
Exactly.
Well, that sounds like exactly what you're looking for in life. Okay, said with love. Well, so you're trucking along the first day. Are you able to keep up the pace? Does it go smoothly?
Yeah, so I needed to cover about 12 miles. You're allowed to camp anywhere that you want to on the trailway as long as you're on the publicly owned land. But I knew I wanted to make it all the way to Clarity Tunnel, which was about 12 miles from where I started. And part of the reason I wanted to make it there is because there was a little bathroom at Clarity Tunnel. And there are little composting toilets sprinkled throughout the trailway about every 5 to 10 miles or so. And so the first one was 5 miles in. I knew I could make it further than that, so I didn't want to stop there and camp. And the very next one was at Clarity Tunnel, which was 12 miles into the day. And I had heard on Reddit, which, is a super trustworthy source.
I believe everything I read on Reddit.
Yeah, somebody had said he encountered some hogs on the trailway and he felt like they were aggressive and he was scared of them, and it made him reconsider, carrying a gun while he's on the trailway. So I'm like, man, that sounds pretty intense. Those hogs sound pretty scary. And I had called the rangers at Caprock and asked, hey, is there anything you're worried about? And they're like, no, there are hogs out there, but it's not a big deal. But anyhow, this Reddit story really scared me. So I decided I was gonna sleep next to one of these posting toilets. So if the big bad hogs came out in the middle of the night and scared me too bad, I could go hop in that toilet, shut the door, and then I'd be okay and protected from these hogs. So this was my whole thought process. Judge it as you will.
I mean, this is exactly my strategy when I think I'm going to be asked to do additional chores. I'm kidding. Jeez. See the look I just got. No, I mean, it makes sense. You don't
need to lie to me.
The nylon's not going to protect you from the hogs, so I guess at least you have a solid structure.
I mean, people die in Texas by hogs every year. Not a lot,
True.
But it does happen.
Now, in fairness, people in Texas also will take out helicopters and automatic weapons and go shooting at javelinas and wild hogs and stuff.
And yet we still can't control their population.
It's a war. It's ongoing. There's no clear winner.
No, there's not. Anyhow, so I had to make it the 12 miles. My pace was fucking phenomenal. I was covering a mile in about 16 minutes, which for me is really fast. Normally when I'm hiking in the mountains, I average about 30 minutes per mile with all of the snack breaks, the picture breaks, the pee breaks, what have you. I'm covering about 30 minutes or 1 mile per 30 minutes. But out here, I knew I was going to be fast, but damn, 16 minutes a mile, 18 minutes a mile, I was fucking flying, and it felt great.
That's awesome. So that said, I think if I recall, you kind of had some anxiety about finding like the perfect campsite, or was that a different night?
No, I knew I had to make it to Clarity Tunnel for that bathroom reason.
Okay.
And I knew that there was a camping area at Clarity Tunnel. I didn't really know what that meant, but I assumed it meant that there would be some clear ground for the tent. But I didn't start hiking until about 3:30 that afternoon.
Right.
And so I had a pretty late start. And even though I was going really fast, I had to cover 12 miles, hopefully before it got dark was what I had intended. But that is not what actually happened. I'm hiking along, I'm making great time, but the reality is I just didn't get started until late in the afternoon with the shuttle. And so it starts to get dark on me as I'm still a couple miles away from where I intended to.
Yeah, what time of year was this again?
This was in December. It did get
short
dark
days.
early. I didn't have a ton of time.
About three and a half hours probably to cover 12 miles. That's pretty tight, for anybody who's not like a trail runner and is only going those 12 miles.
Yeah, I'm not going for a FKT. I'm stopping to take pictures. I'm stopping to pee, to grab snacks from my bag. So I'm enjoying the experience, even though I am moving lightning fast for me.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. So you end up hiking in the dark.
Yeah. So
how was that?
I don't love being out by myself in the dark. Not gonna lie. It scares me every single time. So as it started to get dark...
And yet it keeps happening.
It does. But as it starts to get dark and I realize, night is gonna catch me. I'm gonna be setting up camp in the dark. I pull out my headlamp, and as I snap it on, I realize I got the bad headlamp that I absolutely hate. Would you care to explain what happens with this headlamp?
Whoops. Yeah, so I think maybe, I don't remember if you ended up with this same headlamp at World's Toughest Mudder.
It was me.
Yeah, so I had some headlamp problems there too, but I was able to get them more or less sorted out. But yes, this is I think it's a Black Diamond Spot 400. It's battery operated, and unfortunately the casing for the batteries isn't tight enough, and so they can get jogged loose. And if they get a little bit loose, they start to lose the contact as you're walking along, and so the light will sometimes flicker, it'll grow weaker. They can actually get completely off the contact and the light may end up going out. Basically, it's super annoying. For the most part, what ends up happening is it's just really dim.
Yeah. Because
you've just got the battery's barely touching one of the contacts, and there's just this tiny flow of electricity, barely enough to operate the light. Basically, it's just very, very annoying. And because the casing is kind of loose, you could stop and fix it, but within 5 minutes, it's going to be happening again.
No. Within 30 seconds.
Okay. Well, anyways, it's real bad.
So yeah, I had that headlamp, so I'd turn it on. It would start off really bright, but then within 30 seconds, it was dim to the point that really I didn't have a light. And of course, because I am an anxious person and I pack my fears, I did have a flashlight with me. But I didn't really intend to use that flashlight because I knew I had a whole nother night that I needed light for after this. So I struggled through with a shitty headlamp, cursing it all the while. And as soon as I got home from this trip, I threw that headlamp in the trash, just for the record.
Probably what we should have done the first time.
And as I'm walking in the dark with this terrible light, I'm going through various little canyons, and so there's embankments on each side. And I have this weird thing that I do not like to be closed in at all. I don't like to be closed in by banks, by trees, by brush. I like things to be open when I am in a situation where it's dark or it's sketchy at all, in my opinion. And so going through these various little canyons where there were steep banks on either side with my shitty little light, I was like, oh my gosh, there's going to be a mountain lion out here up on the top of these banks, just waiting to jump down on me. And so I kept looking to the sides, looking behind me, flashing the light everywhere I could. At some point I dug out the flashlight and I was flashing the light everywhere that I could to see if there's glowing eyes. Which, like, what the fuck am I gonna do if I do flash the light and hit a pair of glowing eyes? Like, probably shouldn't be looking for them. Probably don't want to know. But that's what I did.
Yeah, I think the quote I'll always remember about mountain lions is, I think it was from somebody on Alone, who said, if you see them, they're not there to eat you. And that was more or less just like, her message was like, so I just don't worry about it. It's like, either I'll see them and I'm going to be fine, or I won't see them. And I'm either going to be fine or I'm going to be dead, but there's nothing I can do about it.
Yeah.
Which I guess, people survive mountain lion attacks. People fight them off.
They do. And I did have some bear spray, you
had the knife.
I had my neck knife. So I was equipped as long as they didn't stealth attack me, which is how...
Their modus operandi.
Exactly. But I did not get attacked by a mountain lion. And I made it to Clarity Tunnel, even though I had the world's worst light on my head and was fucking pissed about it, too.
This almost feels targeted. Like,
I'm not going to say I wasn't mad at you.
Well, our marriage survived somehow.
It has so far. So I get to Clarity Tunnel. The bathroom is there as promised. The door shuts and bolts. So, like, I know I'm going to be safe from the hogs. It is wonderful. I think that was my first stop, was at the bathroom to see if the door would actually latch. Because at the previous toilet, the door hadn't latched. And I was like, oh my gosh, I could be in big trouble if this door won't shut where I'm going to camp. I'm, like, banking on all of this.
Yeah, I feel like listeners were almost worried that you were going to get there and like Justin was going to be in the bathroom. But luckily he wasn't.
He was not. There was nobody out there.
Yeah.
Although, as I was approaching Clarity Tunnel, I did see a light on the other side of the tunnel, which kind of creeped me out. But, I mean, I don't know. Like, there was a light on the other side of the tunnel, but I never saw any person or any evidence of a campsite, so I don't know what was going on. But anyhow...
Aliens again.
Obviously. So I was able to get my tent set up really quickly. No issues there. Nobody... people talk about the dark skies in the Big Bend region in Texas, but I hadn't heard a lot about the dark skies out in this area. And I was astounded once it got dark at how beautiful and how dark these skies were and how vivid the stars were. Like, it was phenomenal. Once I got my tent up and turned off the lights, the stars were absolutely incredible.
That's awesome. That's one of the things that I am jealous of at times. I love stargazing. It's my favorite thing about going to Big Bend, I think, probably. Much more so than like any of the hiking really is. I love, like, I almost look forward to waking up to go to the bathroom. Because I end up taking like much longer because I just sort of wander along the path, kind of meandering, occasionally realizing I'm about to walk into a friggin' cactus. But yeah, I almost like I'm just walking along with my neck bent up, my head all the way back, gawking at the stars. So yeah, I'm a little jealous about that.
I had never really been distracted by the sky like I was here. I don't have that experience when I go to the bathroom in Big Bend. Like, I will look up and go, oh my gosh, that sky is gorgeous, the stars are beautiful, but also, oh my gosh, I need to go back to sleep because I'm tired. And so I tend to hurry back to bed. But these stars kept me up, and they kept me out of my sleeping bag, which is saying a lot because it was really cold and I was quivering like a little bitch. But I stayed out there looking at those stars for a little longer than I normally would have. And I was real sad to go into my tent.
Yeah, that's surprising because I know we've spent a lot of our time in Big Bend has been in the colder months because it's dangerous to go out there in the heat. So yeah, I guess that does kind of surprise me, this being a trip in December, that you would stay out at all, really, because I know how cold you get. So it must have been some real good stars out there.
Yeah, the stars kind of ensorcelled me out on the Trailway.
Very nice. Very nice. Okay. Well, that I think brings us to the close of day one. And up next, we're going to talk about this tunnel that you keep referencing, but which I don't know anything about.
All right, sounds great.
Okay, so I'm really curious to know more about this tunnel because I've heard you talk about it a whole bunch, but I've never actually sat down and asked you to explain what the whole deal is. So let's do that right now.
Yeah, so this tunnel, it's called Clarity Tunnel, goes through this big old hill. The trains used to run through it because this whole trailway is where trains used to run through.
It's a train tunnel.
Yeah.
Okay.
They blasted through this hill and barreled through it with those trains. So some kind of fun facts. Clarity Tunnel is the summer residence to a really big colony of Mexican free-tailed bats. They say that up to 500,000 bats spend their summers there, which is just hella creepy.
Holy smokes, that's a lot of bats.
Yeah, and I don't know that I love bats, but oh well. I guess the most bats there are usually in April, kind of starting in April. So there weren't as many when I went. I actually didn't see or hear any when I walked through the tunnel, which I was not mad about. Because there are so many bats in the tunnel, there's specific instructions on how to walk through the tunnel. So if you're a biker, they say to get off your bike and push the bike through it so you don't kick up so much dust, or if we're honest, bat poop. It's not really dust at that point. They say to wear a hat. They say to have long sleeves on. Like, you need all this personal protection, I guess, to walk through this tunnel, which didn't creep me out at all.
Yeah, I'm just having flashbacks to that scene from Batman Begins where he falls into the cave and the bats are just swarming all over the place. Only instead of you turn into a superhero, it's just a really gross, disturbing experience that haunts you for the rest of your life.
Well, I can't really speak to that because I didn't see any bats and I didn't fall down.
Well, thank goodness for that. Okay, well, so you did go through the tunnel.
Yes, there's no way to go around it. I had actually wondered if there was a way to go around it because I wasn't real thrilled to walk through a dark, bat-infested tunnel. But when I got there, I mean, this hill kind of stretches from side to side. The trailway is public land, but to the sides, it's private property. And there were fences that I could see. I was like, okay, that's private property on the sides. Okay, so there is nowhere for me to go except straight through this damn tunnel.
Gotcha. Yeah, well, I have to say, I'm very impressed that you were brave enough to go through it because we've been around bats before on a few different occasions, and you have always been a little creeped out by them, to say the least. So kudos to you for braving that fear and going through. I guess I'm glad that you didn't see any bats because I can only imagine that you would have probably screamed and then there would have been a lot more bats.
Probably. And I was worried about the smell too because, bat poop. People call it guano. I don't know if that's like an official. Is that what you're supposed to call bat poop?
That's the technical name for it. Yeah.
Oh, really? So it's like the equivalent of scat?
Yeah.
See, I always thought it was kind of like some slang or whatever. Guano just feels like a silly word.
Yeah, it is a silly word. It's a silly word that means bat poop. So.
I did not know that. Okay, well, I was really worried about the guano smell going in there because my nose is super sensitive. And I was worried I was going to be dry heaving and puking if it was too bad. And maybe it was just because there weren't a ton of bats there at that time that it really was not too bad. Thank goodness. And it wasn't as dark as I thought it was going to be. It's a very long tunnel. I actually don't know how long it is. And so I was really worried, especially since bats like to live there, that it would be really dark. And it wasn't. I could always see daylight. I actually filmed part of it going through it, and you could always kind of see me and see a little bit of the surroundings. So that was a relief too.
Yeah, no, I bet it would have been a lot creepier without, having a little bit of light in there. No, guano actually, my understanding is that it's used as like a traditional ingredient for various like crafts, probably foods, because people are weird. And
by guano here, you mean bat poop still?
I do, yeah, I still mean the same thing. If this was a different type of podcast, maybe we would be delving into that right now. But I just don't think that that's
oh my God,
a topic that we're going to cover. Okay, well, anyways, let's leave guano for now. And let's talk about some other shit that went down. Because before you went through the tunnel, you spent the night in your new tent for the first time. And why don't you just kind of remind everyone, which tent this was that you had taken on this trip, and then tell us how it went, your first night in this tent.
Yeah, so I was using Gossamer Gear's The One tent. I had read a lot of reviews. I listen obsessively to podcasts about the Appalachian Trail, the PCT, the Pacific Crest Trail, all sorts of long distance hiking. And I had heard a lot of people talk about this tent. And because I listen to such outdoorsy podcasts, I get a lot of advertisements. So I'd heard this tent like popping up everywhere.
Yeah.
And it's a lot lighter than the tent that I typically take on my trips, which I do love. My Durston, what version is it?
It's the X-Mid one, not the Pro, just the X-Mid. This is
the poor person tent.
It's the entry level tent for Durston is I think what I would call it as.
I see. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I do love that tent, but
it's a great tent. And when you say much lighter, I think it's important to clarify what much lighter means in the world of backpacking tents.
It means ounces.
Yeah, we're talking between 5 and 10 ounces, depending on your exact kit as far as stakes and...
Yes. So actually, I think the Durston Mid Pro it's either 22 or 26 ounces, I think. So it's getting real close to 2 pounds, 1.5 or whatever. And Gossamer Gear, the one tent was, I think, 16 ounces. So it was
without stakes.
Without the stakes. Okay, but the stakes weren't that high. Okay, I'm not that anal of an ultralighter yet, and I don't think I ever will be. I'm like this weird species of person who wants really light gear but is also really willing to carry way more water than they need to carry.
Committing fully to ultralight too is a pretty expensive proposition. Like, you really have to be saying, this is my life now. My life is spending money on ultralight gear.
Yeah, and I like to be warm and I like to be hydrated, so like I'll never be an ultralighter. But anyhow, the difference between the two tents I believe was 10 ounces.
Okay.
Maybe only 8 or 9 with the stakes. But that's half a pound. That's a lot of weight to shave off.
It does make a difference when you're trying to make those small gains throughout your entire gear kit, right? Like if it was just the tent, maybe it doesn't matter, but you're doing that kind of across the whole setup. Your entire backpack you're aiming to optimize for weight, right?
Yeah. So after my first backpacking trip in Guadalupe Mountains that we talked about, I listed every piece of gear that I had. I listed its weight. And then I got on and I looked at kind of ultralight equivalents and how much of a difference it would make. And the two places where I could really shave off weight were my backpack and my tent. Everything else, the difference between my headlamp and an ultralight headlamp really, maybe even less than an ounce sometimes. But that's where I kind of decided I could really shave pounds between the two.
Yeah. Well, and that does make a difference over the course of miles and days. So totally makes sense. Okay. Well, so that's the tent that we're talking about in this case. We've got Gossamer Gears, the one, and you didn't have any trouble setting it up as we talked about.
It was a breeze.
Yeah. So they did nail the setup. Absolutely. And I also, I had set it up initially as well because we did test it out at home a little bit here just to see. And I have to admit, it was very easy. One of the easiest tent setups I've ever done.
Yeah, that was... I always run through setting up my tent before every backpacking trip because I don't take them often enough that I feel confident that I remember exactly how to put these tents up. And they're never intuitive. Even if they're actually easy, to me at least, these tents are never fucking intuitive.
Yeah, I feel like they're just a little bit easier to put up than it is to take a bearing on a compass. Anyways.
So it was cold that night. Once the sun went down, the temperature really dropped. I think it was in the 30s, probably in the mid 30s. I don't know for sure, but I do think it was about in the mid 30s or so. And I was cold all night long. I hate being cold. I get cold easily. I hate being cold. I brought all sorts of warm gear. I even brought your balaclava. Is that how you say it?
Balaclava.
Balaclava. I fucking hate that thing. But I did bring it. And I was so cold that night that I broke that out. I put my scarf on. I put my headband on. I was sleeping in my smart wool leggings. And I was so cold that I threw my hiking pants over top of them. Like, I had every article of clothing that I had brought was on my body that night.
Yeah, your ability to get cold in just about any circumstances is kind of legendary among our small group of friends. Like, you just get cold so easily. But it's not that's how it goes for some people. Some people just get cold more easily than others. It is one of the mysteries of our marriage that I am always too warm and you are always too cold. I think a lot of people actually can identify with that.
Yeah, I am on the hunt for gear that keeps me warm, and I have failed in every endeavor so far, but I'm going to keep searching.
Yeah. Meanwhile, I constantly search for gear that won't stink horribly when I inevitably sweat profusely into it, because
We've got that base covered, though, with the Abley products, man.
Yeah, I have nailed that. Maybe at some point we'll have to talk a little bit about that. We usually talk about stuff that you're using.
Ooh, stinky man gear stuff.
Yeah, we can talk about Abley and Zenkai, and for now we'll just leave it at the name drops, and people can Google those if they feel so inclined.
Tantalizing.
Okay, so you were cold, you bundled up as best you could, got snug as a bug in the sleeping bag, and you went to sleep after stargazing, and you had a pretty good night, I think, of sleep.
Yeah, it was decent. I mean, like I said, I was cold all night long. Every time I woke up, I was cold. When I, had to go to the bathroom the 10 times during the night, or however often I pee at night, I was cold getting out. So I never felt warm and toasty, never even felt warm. And then in the morning, I woke up and I kind of unzipped my bag a little bit, and my hand fell on top of my sleeping bag, and my sleeping bag was damp.
So elaborate on that.
Yeah, I kind of was like, what the fuck is this? And so I kind of sit up and I'm starting to pat my bag, and the whole thing is actually significantly damp. And when I sit up in the tent, my head hits the top of the tent, and that's wet too. And so I look up and there's water, like fucking condensation all over the top and the sides of this fucking tent. I was kind of just sat there like completely aghast for a minute.
And so I want to ask, because I think this is maybe something people are going to wonder, like when you woke up, were you sweaty? Were you super gross yourself, soaked inside your own clothes?
No, so my clothing was dry. The inside of my bag was dry.
Right.
It was the exterior that was wet. It was the sides of the tent that were wet. But inside of my bag, it was dry.
Yeah, and I think that's a good thing to point out, because if it had been me in that circumstance, my first assumption would have been like, oh gosh, I must have gotten too warm and I sweated a bunch, and like I sort of brought this on myself somehow. But that was not the case. You actually were cold, and you weren't sweating and contributing to the condensation in any meaningful way. This happened all on its own.
Yeah, and so I unzipped the tent, and it's frosty outside, so I know it was pretty cold. Maybe it dropped down all the way into the low 30s that night, but it defrosted very quickly. Everything dried out very quickly as far as the landscape goes. So it was a cold night, but it definitely wasn't what you would call winter conditions. They're Texas winter conditions, but we're not talking about needing a winter tent for this.
Right, yeah. So the thing about camping in Texas is that a 3-season tent pretty much covers all 4 seasons, because winter in Texas isn't like winter in anywhere, north of Texas. We see snow maybe once every few years if there's a crazy storm, and it just doesn't get much below 30. The vast majority of the year. And if it does, you're probably not going camping because you're heat adapted and you're not used to that cold.
Well, yeah, and I don't actually know what the technical definition of a winter tent is, but I'm pretty sure that conditions in Texas don't meet that criteria.
Yeah.
A winter tent is what you need to take to Everest base camp,
Right. Yeah, we're pretty far from that. Okay, so you wake up, the tent is covered in condensation, your sleeping bag is wet, your gear inside the tent, I assume, has gotten some condensation on it too?
Yeah, everything that I had spread out in the tent was a little bit damp. So I grabbed the bag. I went because I was right by that composting toilet where I had conveniently stashed all of my food so the pigs wouldn't come and kill me. I went and I hung my sleeping bag on the side of that composting toilet, or like the side of the building, where the sun was kind of coming up and hitting that wall of the building. And so I was like, okay, well, this will help dry it out as quickly as possible. I pulled everything out of the tent, put it out in the sunlight, and then just kind of left the tent for the moment to make my breakfast. So I had to have my top ramen noodles for breakfast instead of for dinner because I was so cold. I needed something to warm up with.
That's funny. Our daughter was just on the way home from school. She was just telling me that what she learned at school that day was that cup noodles were delicious because one of her friends brought them for lunch or something. And so I guess she got to try some and she was like, they're so good.
Yeah. Top ramen, I had never had it on the trail before, but oh my gosh, it was so good that cold morning and it toasted me right up.
Yeah, I'll say, so when we did World's Toughest Mudder, that was my favorite food in the middle of the night. I was having Ray, who's crewing for us on this race, a friend of ours, bring me heated cups of ramen, and I was just like drinking the noodles and the liquid broth down. It was so good, so refreshing. When you're cold, just like this heat pours through you.
Well, see, the problem with the cup of noodles, because he made me a cup too, and I go to scarf into it, and there's fucking vegetables in it. There's like corn.
Oh my goodness.
Like, what the hell is this? I thought this was just a cup of top ramen, but in a cup. And so then I couldn't eat those noodles for world's toughest. I was actually really upset.
Yeah, I remember that now that you say that. I'd forgotten that because my memories of the noodles were so positive. So I've blanked out any negative feedback on that front. But anyways, let's get back to some other negative feedback here. Let's circle this back around and talk about the tent.
Okay.
Now, have you camped in or conditions similar to this in the Durston tent, just for comparison's sake? Because they're the tents, you know, similar make. The design is definitely different, but their intended goal is pretty comparable. Their size is pretty comparable.
Well, but the big difference is that the Gossamer gear, the one is a single walled tent. The Durston is, what do you call that? Dual wall. It has. It's
yeah. I guess it's a 2-layer tent because you have both the tent itself and then you have a separate rainfly that can be removed.
Yeah, there's a word for that, but I can't remember what it is. So no, actually, I had never camped in conditions that were this cold in the Durston.
So maybe a point of comparison for us to come back to later.
Yeah, I do need to test the Durston out in similarly cold conditions, which I will after this experience for sure. So by the time I got back to the tent after eating my breakfast, it was still really wet inside. I took it down and then I kind of, and I forgot to mention, there was frost all over the top of it as well. Like, I actually peeled a layer of frost off the top of it, which, you know, that's not the tent's fault, I guess. I don't know, maybe it is. But anyhow,
we've camped in January, not in a small tent like this, but in a big tent, and I've never seen that much frost form on the outside of a tent. Now, I think probably you can't make a fair comparison between a full-size family tent and
no, you can't because there's so much more space. But anyhow, so I took the tent down and then I shook it to get all of the ice on the interior to come off. And then I unzipped the tent and there were handfuls of ice inside the tent. And this isn't counting what dripped onto my bag, which again was significantly wet on the outside. Like, there was a hell of a lot of water in this tent over the course of the night.
Yeah, it's crazy to me that you were actually scooping out like a handful of like frost and ice.
Yeah, I have a picture that I took because I was just so aghast of this ice just sitting inside my tent.
Wow. Well, I have to say, I'm glad I wasn't in there because I can only imagine how wet it would have been if I had been in there. I get sweaty during the night on cold nights in January, sleeping outdoors. So, oof.
Yeah. So I wasn't really sure how to dry a tent out when you have to pack it up and put it in your bag.
Right. Yeah. What are you going to do?
I'm like, well, people on the AT talk about wet tents, but they don't really talk about what they do. So I packed...
Suck it up, I assume.
I guess that's what you're doing a lot on the AT or the PCT. So I packed everything up, including my sleeping bag, to walk through Clarity Tunnel, because my plan was, since my sleeping bag was so wet, I'm like, this thing has to dry out. I can have a damp tent. I can't have a damp sleeping bag. So my plan was to spread the sleeping bag across my shoulders and let the sun hit it as I walked. But I knew that I was supposed to cover everything up to go through the tunnel. So I was like, oh my gosh, this is such a bitch. But I put everything inside my bag, including my sleeping bag, walked through the tunnel, and then unpacked my sleeping bag and spread it out across my shoulders, which was actually really nice because it was still cold and I still hadn't completely warmed up. So I did actually kind of like having this sleeping bag across my shoulders as this oversized boa. That was quite a sight, walking down the trailway. And my sleeping bag is a neon green, spread across my shoulders with this gigantic pack across my back, you know, walking through this farmland. I think a lot of the section there was a lot of hunting land. I saw what looked like a lot of blinds, but I also saw like some of it looked like farmland too. I'm like, man, I hope none of these people who live on this land can see me right now, because I sent you a picture of it and
yeah, it was delightful. I really appreciated that. And I think that we'll have to make sure that we share that photo on the blog so that people can see it and enjoy the fullness of this experience.
Indeed. One of my most flattering photos, for sure.
So we've got an exciting experience with a new tent. Did not go so well. Wet gear the next day. Always the best part of any camping trip.
Yeah.
Okay, well, let's circle back to that. We'll have to talk a little bit later about sort of the follow-up to this and your customer service experience with
this is gonna be
Gossamer gear. But there's a lot that happened before you got to that. That's all post-trip wrap-up stuff. So we'll circle back. In the meantime, I think a few things we'll have to talk about here are how the rest of this trip went sideways in ways totally unrelated to the tent and the sleeping bag being soaked.
Indeed.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground so far on this trip through Caprock. We've covered your good friend Justin. We've covered the food setup, bathroom access, campsites, Clarity Tunnel, bats, you not becoming Batwoman, how things have gone with the new tent, hauling wet gear through a tunnel and over the desert and all the way to Grandma's house, I guess. But it doesn't end there.
No, that's only 30 miles in. No, actually 20 miles into the adventure, I believe.
Okay, so I mean, I guess our listeners probably need to prepare for like another 3 hours of this podcast as we relate the adventure, or do things take yet another turn?
Yeah, so after I got through Clarity Tunnel, I'm walking with my wet gear. I was headed toward Kittiquay Depot, is what it's called.
Okay.
And I knew there was a coffee shop there. I knew there was a place to get lunch. And I also planned to recharge my devices there. So like a real through hiker, I headed toward a resupply point. I felt so cool.
Right, yeah. And this is something you had planned in the plan you had written out for me as well here. So I knew roughly when you were going to be there.
Yes. And, regardless of how you're doing the Trailway, you go right through Kittiquay. So you're basically going to pass that coffee shop no matter what you do. There's also a Valero right off the trail in Kittiquay. And so I had planned to resupply water there. And if I needed any other snacks or whatever, I was going to buy them there. And I don't know if this is fortunate or unfortunate for me, but by the time I got to the Valero, I decided, I haven't drunk enough water to need to buy anymore.
Yeah, always interesting when you deviate from the water plan.
I drank as much as I wanted to leading up to that. Guess it just wasn't very much.
Yeah, not that you've ever failed to drink enough in the past or anything. That's never happened.
I never felt dehydrated. I never got the headache that I've gotten in the past, so I felt fine. So I'm justified.
Touché. You're justified. You were there. I wasn't. Okay, so as you're coming into, and I've now forgotten the correct pronunciation for this. I don't think it's Kittiquay.
Well, that's what Wikipedia says it is.
Okay. All right, Kittiquay. I'm pretty sure I was saying it right before, and now I'm questioning everything.
And now you understand why I have such a hard time with this fucking name.
Yeah. All right. So you're heading into fucking Kitty Keys or wherever, and you've got a planned stop, but not only have you been hauling wet gear, but you've been feeling a little bit rough. Not dehydrated, but physically feeling a little bit of difficulty.
Yeah, when I got up that morning, as soon as I got up in my wet tent, I noticed that my hips, both of them, really hurt. And I kind of thought, it's just from sleeping on the ground. I've got a great sleeping pad, but come on, let's be real. You're sleeping on the damn ground. It kind of hurts, especially as you get into your, past your prime. So I thought it would go away as I started to pack up all of my stuff.
You're the picture of youth.
Obviously, not a wrinkle or a gray hair.
I've never seen one.
Anyhow, so I thought it was just from sleeping on the hard ground. I get up, I start moving around, I pack up my shit, I get moving. And none of that fixes this pain that I'm having in my hips. And at some point, it was bothering me enough that it was very distracting as I was walking. And for some idiotic reason, at some point, while I had the sleeping bag strung across my shoulders, I decided I'm going to try a slow jog and see if that makes this hip pain decrease at all. And it did, actually. And so not only did I have that neon green wet sleeping bag strung across my shoulders as I stroll through the Trailway, but I'm also intermittently jogging.
Quite the sight.
Yeah, I was really hoping nobody was out and would see all of that.
Kind of wish I'd been there to film it.
There's some nice video clips that we'll put in the show notes if anybody wants to look at my humiliation.
I mean, I think we all do, but it's out of love. It's sympathy. Okay, so your hips are hurting, and I feel like I had a brief Shakira moment there in my head. And anyways, so you've got some hip pain going on. You've got wet gear. It's been rough going, but resupply point ahead, coffee shop, not just not a convenience store merely, but a nice coffee shop. You can go in and get something hot to eat and drink.
Yes, I was really stoked for that stop. And so I intermittently walked and jogged all the way to that resupply, skipped the Valero, but of note, that is a great place to buy water on the trail and supply any of your food should anybody else be stupid enough to try this Trailway. And as I turned off of the Trailway to head toward the Valero, and then the coffee shop was a little bit past that, I just felt so cool. I thought, is this what thru hikers feel like? I am 30 miles from my car, or however far away I was from it at that point. No, it was more like 40. And I'm walking into town like I am a fucking badass. It felt so neat.
Well, I'm really glad that you felt that way. I wish that feeling had carried on longer than it did, but At least you can relive it now.
Yeah, I still remember the pain in hindsight, but that's okay. So I go into this coffee shop, and the coffee shop, for anybody wondering, is called the Coffee Mill and Mercantile.
Okay.
There I got a hot peppermint mocha and a hot Italian sub, and both were lovely. I can't complain about the food or the coffee there for sure. And they didn't bat an eye when I asked if it was okay if I plugged in my devices, so they get bonus points for that too.
Very nice.
Yeah, so I sat there and I thought that, sitting there, having some caffeine, eating some hot food, letting everything charge, by the time I got up to move on, I'd feel better. I'd had a rough time on my outer mountain loop hike and had some really low spots. And when I sat down to eat lunch for a while and then I got back up, I felt all better. So I kind of thought that was going to happen again on this trip. I just needed some calories and a long sit down because, I hate to take breaks when I'm mountain hiking.
Yeah, I mean, happens to all of us. Sometimes I feel that way after a long day in the office. I just need to go and sit down some more to recharge. Unfortunately,
that didn't quite happen. After I finished my coffee, my food, I decided I need to go to the bathroom in a flushing toilet with running water. That's quite a luxury.
Yeah.
But I had to walk, a whole 100 feet to get back to that bathroom, and I was hobbling. I think I probably looked like, the cowboys with the cowboy waddles where their legs are kind of bow-legged and they're kind of hobbling. That's what I felt like I looked like.
Yeah, kind of the cartoon cowboys where they're like sidling up and they've got the chaps and the spurs on like they've just got off the horse.
Yes.
Yeah.
So at that point I was like, okay, well, this didn't quite work out how I thought it was going to. And I had planned to camp close to what's called Turkey Depot, which is about the halfway point on the Trailway, and I was going to set up my tent somewhere. But considering that my tent was still wet, stuffed in my bag somewhere, and my hips hurt so badly, I didn't think that sleeping on the ground again was going to be good for my hips. So I also happened to know that there was a boutique hotel in Turkey where I was going to camp. And so like a little wimp, I went and I reserved a hotel room in Turkey instead of camping.
Well, look, I think in fairness, you were kind of at a point physically where even just a regular walk was pretty painful.
Yes.
This is the way I remember you telling it on the day of, is that I think maybe the word agony was used. It might have been bandied about a little bit.
I can't recall that.
Sure. Okay.
But yeah, my thought process was...
Wink, wink.
Yeah, wink, wink, nod, nod. My thought was, if I sleep on the hard ground again, it's going to make this problem worse. I'm not going to be able to get to my car. So if I sleep in a warm bed, I'll be more comfortable. The pain will magically go away, and I'll be able to finish this damn hike.
Yeah. I mean, it makes sense.
It does. And I honestly got lucky that the hotel had vacancy because it's a very small place. But it all worked out. So anyhow, I left Kittaquay, whatever the fuck it is. At this point now, you've messed me up.
Well, obviously it's Kittaquay. Everyone knows that.
Oh my gosh. And I headed towards the next little comfort station on the Trailway, which is called Mullins Rise. And at each comfort station, there's a bathroom. And much to my delight, every time I stopped at one of those little bathrooms, there was actually toilet paper in it. I was really delighted. I kind of thought it would just be a toilet and people would have taken all the toilet paper. But every single one, and I did check out every single one along the way, there was toilet paper.
I mean, that's a nice luxury. Now, always important to note, I think we generally plan when we're on the trail to bring our own little mini roll of toilet paper because you just never know.
Yes.
But very nice to not have to use it.
Exactly. But as I got close to this little comfort station called Mullins Rise, the footing really changed. The trailway really started to change. It had been pretty dirt packed underfoot, kind of rocky sometimes. And at this kind of almost halfway point, the ground kind of started to get a little bit more grassy. There were what I think you'd call tussocks, like grassy tussocks on the ground. Kind of made me think that I was hiking in Alaska. And it made me really glad to not be on a bike because I had thought about biking the trailway. A lot of people do, but with these mounds of grass, I think being on a bike would have been really difficult. For at least for me, I'm not a great mountain biker.
Yeah, I mean, I've watched real mountain bikers go up and down over the most ridiculous rocks and slopes and things. So I feel like it's hard for me to judge what's realistic on a mountain bike. But yeah, I can say certainly there's a lot that I can't do. And I know you're maybe a little bit better than me, but...
So as I kind of got close to this Mullins Rise, you see Caprock Canyon State Park off to the left. And so that was kind of cool to be able to, I recognized some of the landmarks of the state park. I was like, oh my gosh, I've been there. I've hiked around there. You know, it's kind of neat. But at kind of around the same area, I came up on I felt like it was creepy. There was a group of RVs. I don't know. There was maybe 4 to 5 RVs. And remind you, I'm in the middle of nowhere. I haven't been near any paved roads for quite a long time. There are some quote unquote roads that I'm crossing that are just dirt roads that cross the trailway, but I haven't seen anybody using them. So just randomly in the middle of nowhere, kind of close to the state park, there's these 4, 5 RVs in this big old group. And the area just kind of looked a little bit dilapidated. I couldn't tell if anybody was actually in the RVs. They didn't look like they'd been abandoned, but there was also no sign of human life. And I'm walking through there just hoping nobody jumps out and starts yelling at me or snatches me away into the RV or I don't know. It almost looked like some Breaking Bad shit could be going down in there.
Yeah, I mean, I would certainly rate that as creepy for sure. So I guess something to keep an eye out for. Random creepy RVs on the trail.
Yeah, it felt very weird. And I also wondered, these were big RVs. So I kind of wondered how they got them out there. But anyhow,
yeah,
I guess it doesn't matter. So at this point, approaching the state park, I was getting pretty tired, in addition to having that hip pain. There was still a good sprinkling of bridges as I kind of went through this area. I walked through some farmer's land. It was actually kind of cool. After I left Kittiquay, I walked directly through a cotton field and the trailway just ran right through it. But I was, 100 feet from somebody's house walking through their land. And that felt, I guess I want to say neat, but in hindsight, I was like, this is a little weird. And I hope they don't run out and yell at me like I'm on it's public land when you're on the trailway. But I kind of wondered how they felt about people walking through basically their front yard.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, part of me is like, it's no different than a sidewalk or a bike trail running through. But I guess when you're in a city or a suburb, you sort of expect people to be walking by your house, even people that you don't know. Maybe when you're in the country, you sort of don't expect that as much. But I suppose if you've lived in a place where this trailway's been for a very long time, you get used to it. And as long as people aren't causing problems, I think that's maybe the other thing is out in the country, perhaps there are some people who feel a little more licensed to be disrespectful of others' property. And unfortunately, a very few people can give the vast majority of perfectly decent hikers a bad name.
Yeah, I made sure to leave no trace, to not litter, to be respectful since I was going right through their land. And I hope that other hikers will do the same.
Right, exactly. It's not that hard to just not be a jackass.
It's really not. So like I said, there were still some bridges intermittently along the trail. And at one point, as I'm getting to within about 5 miles of the hotel or so, I was hurting so bad and I was so tired that I decided I'm going to rest. And I was actually hurting so badly that I took off my pack and laid down on one of the bridges.
Wow.
Yeah, it was ridiculous. It was maybe a touch dramatic, but I did it.
Yeah, I have to say, I don't think aside from that one time when you got super dehydrated in the Chisos Mountains, I don't think I've ever seen you, like, even really need to take a break while hiking.
I don't generally take breaks.
Usually what I see is that you stop briefly to wait for me. Sometimes.
Yeah, if I'm in a good mood.
Right. You know, if I haven't pissed you off recently.
Yeah. We'll talk about that in another episode. So I wasn't having a whole lot of fun. It was miserable. I was popping every single pain medication I had, my ibuprofen, my acetaminophen. It wasn't touching it. So those last couple miles to the hotel were pretty miserable. And I was so tired that it was getting hard for me to jog. So like my original attack had been to walk, jog, because the jogging made my hips feel better.
Yeah.
But I was tired at this point. It's really hard, in case anybody doesn't know, to jog with 30, 35 pounds on your back, especially when you're not trained for that.
Right. Yeah, I mean, a lot of your training for these trips, you're essentially rucking. You're carrying weight in a backpack, but you're not necessarily going out and jogging, doing hill repeats.
Yep, no jogging involved.
Yeah.
But I finally got to the hotel. And again, it felt really cool coming off of the Trailway. I turned right and headed down to the hotel. It was less than half a mile from the Trailway. And so I'm walking through this tiny little town. And it felt really cool to get there on your own 2 feet.
Sure. Certainly an achievement.
It's maybe the closest thing that I'll get to through hiking. I don't know. I guess we'll see. But Turkey is a really tiny town. 2023, the population was 325. So I think I walked through like the only neighborhood that is in the town. And so this little hotel was really, really cool. I had gotten the cheapest room. So I knew I wasn't going to have a private bathroom. I was going to have to share a bathroom and a shower, which I guess is okay when you're not planning to get a room.
Yeah.
So I'd been kind of cold on and off the whole day, like alternating between hot and cold. And so as soon as I got into the room, I cranked the heater up to 82 degrees. And then I kind of spread all of my wet stuff from my pack across one of the beds. There was 2 beds in the room. And so I spread my wet tent across the bed because I'm like, this is my opportunity to dry it out. So that way it'll be dry for the next night after the hotel night when I plan to camp again.
I'm sure they just loved cleaning up after you.
I made sure to try to keep all the dirt on the ground, actually, because the bed sheets were white. And so I was scared because the dirt out there is so red and clay looking that I kind of shook the tent off before I put it up on the bed because I knew I would get caught pretty easily if I wasn't careful.
At least the worst they had to do was just vacuum thoroughly. No, that's not too bad. Honestly, pretty good for some places. Anyways, how was the hotel? Was it a nice hotel?
Oh my gosh, it was so cute. So this was in December, early December, that I tried to hike this trailway. And so it was decorated for Christmas. It's this old looking building. And when I walked in, there's a Christmas tree, there's a nativity. And on every single door for your room, and these doors are wooden, there's a green wreath. It was so cute. It really did feel more like a bed and breakfast than a hotel. I really think they're underselling their property, the way they advertise it and what they call it.
Yeah, I remember some of the pictures that you sent me after you got there. And I know you were kind of gushing just about the warm room, but then also about how cute it was, about the restaurant. And I have to admit, it looked very cool. You know, kind of very sort of old time country feeling, in a way that, rather than feeling run down, that feels sort of vintage.
Yes.
To use one of those, HGTV buzzwords, right?
Yeah, if you ever have a reason to stay in Turkey, I would definitely recommend staying at the Turkey Hotel. Totally worth it. And honestly, it wasn't all that expensive. My room was less than $100, and that was in December during, I don't know, hotels tend to be a little bit more expensive in the holiday area. So,
and a last minute room.
Yeah. So I really thought it was worth the money.
Yeah, which is honestly a rave review for any hotel.
Yeah. So as soon as I cranked the heat up to 82 and spread all my shit everywhere, I decided I was going to take a shower because I love hot showers. And I was pretty sure that if I just stood in a hot shower for a long time, that my hips were going to feel better. Like that hot water is just going to wash all this pain and soreness away, and I was going to be just fine.
Right. Again, makes sense.
Yeah. I mean, I'm doing all the things, right? So I went and I took a shower, and oh my goodness, that place has some nice hot water. I did scald my skin for a long time. It was great.
Again, rave review for any hotel. So
yeah. Like I was
Hotel
in there,
Turkey killing it.
I was in that shower for a good 15 to 20 minutes. It was incredibly hot the whole time. Amazing. They give you these little, I should look it up. We'll put it in the show notes. These little lavender bath soaps.
Okay.
That came in the room, and they smelled so good as I was showering, using this body wash, this conditioner, this shampoo. Phenomenal. Just the whole experience was great.
Very nice.
But when I got out of the shower, my hips still hurt.
Yee.
Yeah. So I laid down for a little while, thinking, okay, I just get off my feet in a soft bed, in a warm room. It's going to be fine. So I did that for a while, and then I decided to go down to the little restaurant that they have and check out their food. I had to hobble down the stairs. My room was up on the second floor, so it didn't help the hips either.
Unfortunate.
So at this point, I'm getting a little nervous, but I go down and think, okay, some more hot food's going to fix all of my problems. It's going to be fine. And this hotel is really neat. Their little restaurant that they have is built off the back of the hotel. It's not really enclosed, so it's exposed to the elements. So it was really cold. They had some heat lamps and stuff, but I still froze my ass off sitting out there. But the burger I had was phenomenal. And the bun, oh my gosh, the food was just amazing. Fries, they were great. The ranch was great. Like,
very nice.
you know how critical I am. Usually I've got something to complain about.
Yeah, I mean, it's, one of the reasons I don't like picking the restaurant is that, there's always something that could be better. Almost any restaurant you go to.
Yeah.
And, one of the reasons that we so often eat so well is that you make the choices.
It's true.
You're a little pickier than I am, and I often benefit from that. So I appreciate it.
Yeah, I kind of like don't want to go back and eat there because I don't know, was it the pain? Was it the exercise? Was it like the whole experience that made the food taste so good? I think.
Will the same, cook or chef be working there?
Right.
A lot of factors, but at the very least, when you were there, it was phenomenal.
It was amazing. And so there was a Valero in Turkey that I had planned to get water at as well. And at this point, I was out of all my pain medications. I had taken all the ibuprofen and acetaminophen I had in my bag. And I didn't think that they were helping, but also I was in so much pain. I'm like, oh my gosh, I just want some medicine that might do something. Like, maybe I'm hurting so much because the medicine has worn off. I don't know. The Valero was about a half a mile one way. So it was going to be a 1 mile round trip for me to walk to this Valero to go get medicine that may or may not help me. So instead of doing that, I actually asked the server, I was like, hey, do y'all have any ibuprofen or acetaminophen? And I can't believe I asked her that because I hate asking people for things, particularly strangers.
Right. This is a real testament to how bad you actually were feeling, that you wouldn't go out of your way to avoid asking for help.
Exactly.
Or having a conversation with a stranger.
Yeah. So I was pretty desperate, and unfortunately, they didn't have any medicine. So I dragged myself back up the stairs to my room and kind of alternated between laying down, trying to stretch, and then getting up to test my hips. Because I just kept thinking, if I just lay down, if I just stretch, it's going to go away. I'm going to get better. This is in my head. It's not as bad as I think it is. I'm making it up. So I kept doing, these different things that I thought might help and then getting up to test it. And every time I got up, it was horrible.
Yeah. Despite your best attempts to gaslight yourself into disbelieving in this pain, it persisted. And unfortunately, I think we're getting to the point here where you had to make a really difficult decision, right? Because you've still got, 35 miles left on the trail. Yeah,
I was 31 miles away from the car at this point. You're 7.5 hours away from me.
Yeah, you're spending another night in a hotel if I'm having to come and get you.
Which, I mean, I wouldn't have been too mad about, but so I called you.
I might have been a little mad.
I called you kind of crying about my predicament.
Yeah, I actually don't remember a lot of that conversation, except that you were upset and that you couldn't decide what to do, but you kind of knew what you wanted to do and what the right call was.
Yeah, you know, if I'm honest, I knew before I called you what the right call was. I just hadn't admitted it to myself yet.
Yeah.
And, you know, it's hard because I worry about that line between being a little bitch and actually making a good call. Because physical stuff is hard for me. I'm not a natural athlete. Every time I work out, I want to quit. Every time I go for a run, I want to quit because it hurts and I hate it. And so every time I do anything remotely physical, I want to bitch out. And so I have this tendency, I'm always fighting myself to not bitch out.
Yeah.
And so that can make it really hard to know when you're not being a little bitch.
Right. Yeah. I mean, there's a difference between the natural discomfort that comes with exercise and physical activity and the kind of pain that indicates that something is wrong with your body, the kind of pain that says, actually, no, you should like either A, take a break, or B, get out of this situation. And obviously there are gradations there, you know, where, you know, taking a break is one thing. You had tried that.
I had.
Right? You had tried stretching, which often resolves pain that is primarily, you know, nerve-based or repetitive motion-based. Sometimes rest and stretching resolve a lot of things, and you'd done that multiple times.
Yeah.
You had the hot shower, you had the hot food. I mean, you did all the things like we talked about.
And, you know, I wish I'd had another day to just stay at the hotel and see what happened. But, you know, I had very limited time off. I had to be back at work. So I didn't have the luxury of taking a rest day. So I knew I had to make a decision that night. And so after talking to you, I finally admitted that I needed to stop and find a way to get off the Trailway. And the lady who had shuttled me from where I parked the car to my starting point, she said, you know, if you need anything, you message me, you let me know. And she was so nice. I felt like she actually meant it. You know, it felt like very genuine. And so after I got off the phone with you, I messaged her and was like, hey, did you mean what you said? I didn't actually say that.
Right.
But, you know, that's basically what the message was. And she's like, oh my gosh, yes, I'll come get you tomorrow. I'll take you to your car. So that I was so lucky to find a person who was so kind and so willing to accommodate an idiot hiker.
Yeah, no, it's very, very nice of her. Really got you out of a very difficult spot because your two fallback options were you walk back or I come and get you. And
yeah,
the situation you were in, it was going to be me coming and getting you.
I'm so grateful. So grateful.
Thank goodness. Thank goodness for kind, decent people.
Yeah.
Who actually give a fuck.
Yeah, and you know, it was a little bit restorative. My faith in humanity is pretty low at this point in my life, and you know, you read the through hiking books and listen to the through hiking podcast, and they talk about, you know, the trail angels and stuff, and you go, oh my, I've kind of thought, well, maybe I need to through hike just to restore my faith in humanity because some of these experiences sound so amazing. So I got to experience a little bit of trail angelness on an experience that wasn't a real through hike.
Yeah. Well, so you made the decision to bail.
Yep.
Which I think one thing I want to point out, you like to give yourself a hard time about making these decisions at times, but I think a lot of people force themselves to go on in situations where they should have made the decision to turn back or to ask for help. And that is why deaths on a trail happen, right? That's how people get themselves killed or severely injured or dehydrated and lost. And even if they survive, like, well, maybe if you had just stopped and said, actually, this is not a good situation. I wouldn't put my child or my best friend in this situation. Why am I putting myself in it? Assuming that, you know, they're equal competence.
Yeah. One of the things that helped me make the decision is I just realized I wasn't having any fun at all.
Yeah.
And I do a lot of different things for a lot of different reasons. And this wasn't supposed to be a suffer fest. I've done World's Toughest Mudder, and that was supposed to be a suffer fest. So I went into it with that mentality, but that was not the point of this trip.
Yeah.
And so when I kind of really admitted to myself that I wasn't having any fun, that it was miserable and that I was suffering, it made it a lot easier to make that call.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's the other question, that you have to ask when it is not a matter necessarily of safety, but of, what are you really out here for? And in knowing that in advance helps a lot. And that's something that I think that helped you.
Yeah. And
you knew why you were there.
Yeah. I mean, I know I can do the Trailway. I may have underestimated it a little bit, but it's not something that I had to do then and there to like prove my self-worth or stroke my ego or anything like that. It's going to be there in the years and months ahead. I can go back to it if I want to. I'm not proving anything, even if I suffer through it.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. You were out there to have an enjoyable time, to build some backpacking experience, to try out some new gear. And, if it all went to shit, then like, why stay? Right. And that was the answer.
Exactly. Yeah.
So
in the morning, my ride picked me up. I was a little sad. I was FOMOing a little bit, but I still knew it was the right decision.
As one does.
Yes. She brought me back to my car, and I was so nervous. I was convinced that Justin was going to have done something terrible to it. Smashed in the windows and like looked for anything valuable. Not that there was anything valuable in it. Or like taken the car or slashed my tire. Like I was pretty sure something terrible was going to be waiting for me. But sorry, Justin, there was nothing. My car wasn't damaged. I made all these assumptions like a bitch.
Justin was just a weird but totally harmless dude in the desert.
Yeah.
Doing weird desert dude things for no reason.
Yeah. And after that, like a responsible hiker, I just want to say that I did go back and I picked up my water caches that I hadn't used. Remember, we're leaving no trace. It was a pain in the ass to have to go get them. But if you put that water out there or any other cache, you got to go get it.
Yeah. Good note. Always a good reminder. Clean up after yourself, folks. You learned this at 5. You should still do it at 50 or any other age in between.
I was going to say, don't even imply that I'm the big 5-0.
Not my intention. Anyways, moving on, let's talk about lessons learned, retrospectives, things that happened afterwards, unless I'm skipping over some other important detail.
Oh, I just hadn't prepared for lessons learned and such.
Okay, well, I mean, I feel like we kind of always talk a little bit about, like, what are your thoughts after the fact? Looking back on it now.
Well, kind of a little different question or thought. When I left, after I'd packed up all my water and was headed home, I felt a lot of FOMO. I also, I feel like a lot of people will be like, oh, I'm going to be back to conquer this Trailway, or I'm going to come back and do it. And I don't know that I need to. I don't know that I will. And I kind of thought that was a different sort of takeaway, that I feel like I got a taste for the Trailway, and I'm not sure that I need to go do the whole thing.
Yeah, maybe one serving was enough, and seeing the back half maybe isn't worth it.
Yeah, I was writing an article of this trail report on the Trailway, and at the end, I caught myself typing out some stupid line like, "Oh, and I'll be back someday to finish it." And then I stopped and I thought, "Well, will you really?" And I thought, "No, actually, that's not necessarily true. I don't know if I will." I don't know that it was pretty enough or exciting enough to merit my limited and precious time off.
Yeah.
And like I said, I know I can do it. Maybe I need to cut down on my mileage if I were to ever go back and not go for, 20, 25 mile days, since that seemed to get me in trouble.
Right.
But it's a 62-mile trailway. It's easy to navigate. It's flat. Like, it's totally doable. So I don't know. I don't know if I need to go back or not.
Well, we'll put a pin in that, maybe come back to it in the future. A couple of other things kind of on the retrospective front, to follow up on 2 of the sort of wrenches thrown into this adventure. One, Gossamer Gear. You reached out to customer service with Gossamer Gear to express your dissatisfaction with the way that things worked out with this tent that's supposed to be a 3-season tent, which in Texas, we really only have the 3 seasons. Mostly it's just the 1 season and then a little bit of spring and a little bit of fall, and they kind of get chilly, but never really wintry in any way. Sometimes we get a day or 2 of winter. I should admit that. Sometimes in February, we'll get a day of winter.
Yes.
But this wasn't that. This was a perfectly normal, somewhat chilly December in Texas, and that tent was just dripping all over all your things. Doesn't really, bode well for taking it on any more serious adventures, on any more serious trails than the Caprock Trailway. So how did this go, right? How did this play out?
It wasn't great. So I voiced my complaints, and what they told me, David from Gossamer Gear said, "Hey, Gabrielle, single wall shelters can take a bit of getting used to, but we have many people on the PCT, CDT, and AT right now loving the 1 and the 2. Okay, well, I don't love it in Texas, and I'm pretty sure I wouldn't love it on the AT, which is rumored to be very wet. So he told me how I could mitigate condensation, and a couple of the options he gave me are to keep at least one vestibule door open. Not something I really want to do when it's freezing cold, but, I could see that. And then he also suggested keep a small pack towel to wipe down the walls when needed, which, remember, the weight difference between the Gossamer Gear, the 1, and my Durston, it's a good couple of ounces, but it's not humongous.
Right. I think it was, like 5 ounces. Once you've got stakes
5 to 8 ounces, something like that.
Yeah.
I don't want to be unfair to Gossamer Gear here.
It is a light tent.
If I'm carrying a towel just to wipe the walls of my tent, and then in the morning that towel is wet, like that's adding on 1 ounce, probably 1 to 2 ounces just for the towel. And then when the towel is wet, God knows how much weight that is. So what's the point of carrying a little towel so I can wipe it down? Also, I don't want to do that in the middle of the night. I don't sleep well. I don't have time to be waking up in the middle of the night, frantically wiping everything down and then trying to go back to sleep.
Yeah, that doesn't really feel like an optimal solution to the problem, I have to say.
And,
carry a towel because it gets wet. I don't know.
Yeah, so there were some other stupid suggestions that I had already done when I set up the tent. And then he went on to say that, unfortunately, we do not have the resources to accept used gear, as we are only a small company of a few individuals. I would look at listing it on geartrade.com, ebay.com, or on that Reddit Ultralight Gear Trade. And that was it.
Yeah, I mean, I understand they may not be able to take returns. It is what it is, but definitely not what you want from a customer service experience for them to close by saying, if you don't like it, sell it to somebody else.
Yeah, I was kind of floored that his suggestion was to sell it and that they would make a tent that condensates so easily. I don't understand how it's so popular. Maybe I'm just a little wimp and can't tolerate what I need to tolerate for backpacking. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I guess, when this episode goes live, maybe people will tell us what we did wrong.
Please, give me good suggestions. Don't tell me to carry a fucking towel in my pack to wipe it down with. But if you have any magic suggestions for helping to mitigate condensation in Gossamer Gear's The 1 tent, I'd love to hear it. Otherwise, I'm going to be carrying my Durston, and I'll suck it up and carry a few extra ounces.
Yeah. Well, I personally am a big fan of the Durston tent, so I'm totally okay with that. Plus, we can both fit in that one because we got the 2 for that one.
Well, yes, I would never carry the 1 when I was hiking with you because you're the 1.
Aww. Well, anyways, one final piece of follow-up here before we close things out. How has everything worked out with your hips? Because I know we've had some doctor's visits, we've had some treatments.
Fuck me, that's a sore subject. So I thought it was just going to go away. When I went back to work the week following that, I'm waddling around. Everybody's asking me what's wrong. And, I had a really weird, I went and walked too far and my hips started to hurt story. I felt like a real weirdo. But I thought it would just kind of go away if I just left it alone. And it didn't. Like, it wasn't agonizing pain anymore, but I didn't feel quite right. And so about 6 weeks after the trip, I decided, nope, I'm not quite right. I've got another trip coming up. I really need to do something about this. So I did go see my doctor. He thinks it's trochanteric bursitis, which is basically an old lady syndrome, which makes me feel real great about myself. Got some steroid injections with some lidocaine in both hips. That helped. I was able to do my next trip without any pain, without any issues. But now the pain has started to come back. So I'm not quite sure what to do.
Yeah, so a bit of an ongoing challenge, something to keep an eye on for sure. And we don't really know exactly what triggered it. I think, we kind of had some theories that maybe it was the new backpack not being fitted quite right.
No, I wasn't. I was using.
Were you taking?
I was
you took
using
the
my
old one?
Osprey.
Oh, you took the
It was
Osprey.
pre-Christmas. You hadn't gifted me with the
Oh.
Durston backpack yet.
That's right.
I'm pretty sure this is what happened. I think my stride was different on the Trailway.
Because you were pushing so hard?
Yes, because normally when I hike, I'm hiking in mountainous regions. I'm hiking in Big Bend and Guadalupe Mountains. I'm going up and down. And so my strides tend to be a lot smaller.
Right.
But because the Trailway was so flat, I was taking very big, very fast strides. We talked about how fast I was moving. Like, I don't know what anybody else's pace is, but I was going 16 minutes a mile, 20 minutes per mile. That's lightning fast for me.
Right. That's like adventure race mile paces.
Yeah. And so doing that back to back to back to back, I think is what did me in. That's like my gut feeling. I don't see how anything else could have really triggered it.
Yeah, because it did kind of come out of the blue. You've done a lot of big miles in the past and not had these problems.
Yeah.
But you weren't necessarily pushing the pace in the same way. Pushing the pace while carrying that much weight. So I'm thinking of like World's Toughest Mudder, for example, the example we like to go back to. You were certainly putting up big miles there, and I know you were trying to maintain a pace as much as possible.
But for the most part,
you weren't carrying weight.
I was jogging for the most part or slow walking.
Yeah.
I'm going to be really honest here. I was not fast walking on World's Toughest. When I was walking,
that's true. I mean,
I was walking.
I was a slog out there. But anyways, yeah. So I guess that's kind of it. That's the Trailway. That's the retrospective and the wrap up and the whole experience.
Yeah, it was fun for the most part. I definitely think it's a good adventure for people. I would definitely encourage people to get out there and experience it.
A little more beginner level and beginner friendly than some places you can go in Texas for sure.
Yeah, because you can cache. There's a lot of places in Texas where you can't cache water. Like Big Bend National Park, you're not allowed to cache. Guadalupe, you're not allowed to cache. So you carry everything.
They also don't have coffee shops along the trail.
And
it's an oversight.
It's impossible to get lost on the Trailway. So all you have to be able to do is carry your shit and walk.
Yeah.
Which is apparently harder than I thought it was.
Yeah, so the note is carry your shit and walk, but not too fast. Take your time a little bit, enjoy it a little bit. Okay, all right, well, unless you have any other thoughts, I think that pretty much wraps things up for us here.
All right.
Okay, well, thanks everyone. This has been another episode of This Fucking Trail, and I guess we'll see you next time.
Until next time.